I'm Darrell Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie. He'll be back in 27 days. The countdown is down to 27. It was up around 60 once upon a time. Well, there are good things here. We're down in the 20s. And we'll start out today's show with an article that he sent me yesterday. I downloaded it just before leaving for the studio. I didn't have a chance to really go through it and make sense of it. But it makes a lot of sense, and it's long, so I'm going to break it up into several parts so that today, tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, we'll hear parts of this and get through it. And then by Friday, there should be an update to some of the current goings on in the effort to react to the shootings in Odessa, El Paso, Dayton, the latest round of mass shootings. And so, and we'll update you then. The article is called Lies the Left Tells About Guns. Now, don't hold it against me. That perhaps you know something about me that would not qualify me to read this article to you, or to bring this to you. I think we all need to be armed with information. And so let's do that. Let's find out what it is that American Greatness website has published on that Bob Klitzkie sent on September 9th. And what it is, basically, there are a list of the worst offenses. What the left is saying, lies the left tells about guns. Okay, so I'll do the beginning of it, and then I will read 2 of them a day of the 6. Congress reconvenes this week after a summer fraught with multiple mass shootings. Reportedly, legislation implementing tighter gun control is on the table, with rumored support by some in the White House. The rhetoric surrounding guns continues to escalate. Here's the thing about guns. The Constitution, that handy little document, guarantees our rights to them, and that guarantee is a profound reflection of the nature and character of our freedoms. As Ben Dominish of The Federalist wrote recently, quote, "The right to bear arms is not about hunting. Rather, it is a natural right of the deepest significance to the relationship between the citizen and the state. It is in the Constitution because the men who defeated the greatest empire in the world wanted us to be able to defend our freedom. The simple fact that we have a right to own guns doesn't mean individuals must own them, use them, or even like them. But what it does mean is that people advocating further regulation of firearms should at least have a baseline understanding of how firearms actually work, as well as the current statutory environment that regulates their purchase, handling, and use. Unfortunately, the current rhetoric coming from Democrats betrays a deep misunderstanding about all those things. Here are some of the worst offenses." And then it lists over the next several pages Bernie Sanders, Dianne Feinstein, Beto O'Rourke, Kamala Harris, David Axelrod, Chuck Schumer. Okay, so I'll read Bernie Sanders and Dianne Feinstein today. Okay, deal? And I'll also, let's see, click up on Facebook so I can see your reaction. Rolling into the studio a little, cutting it a bit close, but actually having a very pleasant conversation out in the parking lot for a couple of minutes on the way in. And so this is, hi there, Lynn. Lynn Tydinko has joined us here online, and if you can get us on the radio and be sitting there in the anonymity of your office space or your car or your kitchen or your living room or wherever it may be. Thank you very much for joining us today. Our telephone number is 888-8255. If you'd like to call, you got something on your mind, and we will get to all the various news items that are in the papers today, and lots of interesting stuff. Even something I got, a letter I downloaded that came out at 11:25 this morning. But we'll get to all that. Okay, Bernie Sanders, quote, "We must end the sale and distribution of assault weapons." There's a lot to unpack here about so-called, quote, assault weapons. The first challenge is the absence of any fixed legal definition of what constitutes an assault weapon. Numerous state laws have defined the phrase as everything from paintball guns to all semi-automatic firearms to Remington 11-87 shotguns, the latter famously used by former presidential candidate John Kerry on Labor Day 2004 to demonstrate his legitimately good trap shooting skills. The vague term assault weapon is distinct from an assault rifle, however, which refers to a rapid-fire magazine-fed rifle that allows the shooter to select between semi-automatic, requiring you to pull the trigger for each shot, fully automatic, hold the trigger and the gun continuously fires, or three-round burst modes. Assault rifles are, for all intents and purposes, already banned in the United States. More on that shortly. So for anyone proposing to ban, quote, assault weapons, the question needs to be, which guns? Because depending on your definition, it could be just slide-action shotguns and guns with adjustable stocks, or it could be every semi-automatic pistol in America as well as your kid's BB gun. Good point. We have to be talking, if you're going to make policy, law, everyone has to understand clearly what you mean. So the words must be plain. And this also goes back to, statutory construction. If you're going to challenge it or something to withstand challenge in the Supreme Court, one of the things that they do is they check to see whether the language is actually clear. Can a reasonable person understand how the law is to be implemented? And so, Dianne Feinstein, and this is one of the lies that the left tells about guns, quote, "The assault weapons ban worked. Studies prove that mass shootings dropped while it was in effect." Except it didn't. Quote, "There is no compelling evidence that it saved lives," according to Duke University public policy experts Philip Cook and Kristen Goss. A 2004 Department of Justice study found no evidence the ban had any effect on gun violence, stating, quote, should it be renewed, the ban's effect on gun violence are likely to be small at best and perhaps too small for reliable measurement. Other studies have found no statistically significant relationship between, quote, assault weapons or large capacity magazine bans and homicide rates. There is also substantial misunderstanding surrounding what the assault weapons ban, which passed in 1994 and sunset in 2004, actually did. It didn't ban anyone from owning an assault style, again an undefined term, weapon. All magazines and weapons produced before the ban were grandfathered in, and some companies actually ramped up production of the soon-to-be outlawed firearm components, drastically increasing ownership of what lawmakers were seeking to reduce. The only automatic weapons legal to purchase for civilians in the United States are those registered between 1934 and 1986. So if the ban didn't actually apply specifically to types of guns, to what did it apply? Mostly cosmetic military-style features. Specifically, semi-automatic rifles with detachable magazines and certain additional features, including pistol grips, bayonet mounts, folding stocks, or magazines holding more than 10 rounds of ammunition. Also, given the frequently cited claim that, quote, assault weapons lead to more murder, it's worth pointing out that at least 730,000 AR-15s, not an assault rifle, but more on that in a bit, were manufactured and legally sold while the assault weapons ban was in effect, and the national murder rate declined. It's also true that rifles like the AR-15 are only used in a tiny percentage of murders. 27% of murders are committed without firearms of any type. Okay? And so, I remember that back in the 1950s, before the assault weapon ban and all that stuff, when you could still get an automatic rifle. The weapon of choice were those cheap Saturday night special handguns that were cheap to produce and cheap to buy and throw away after your crime. Yeah, you know, from the film noir days, right? So tomorrow I'll continue with a quote from Beto O'Rourke and Kamala Harris. How about that? Deal? Okay, good. That was our Second Amendment portion of the show. And so we go now to Zami Ikatni. And today we've got the editorial from the Guam Daily Post is help minimum wage earners with raise and employers with a tax relief. And for the Pacific Daily News, it's a guest column special to USA Today by Patty Davis, an author of the novel The Wrong Side of Night. And she writes on the topic, Speak for Survivors of Mass Shootings. I'm going to refrain from spending time on this show, repeating what Patty Davis has said, but you're certainly welcome to go and check it out in the PDN. But I think I'll just lay that aside, and we'll get right to the Guam Daily Post editorial. Help minimum wage earners with raise and employers with tax relief. Immediately after the enactment of the 2020 budget bill into law, the Democratic leadership in the legislature unpacked the minimum wage bill as the next big-ticket item on the lawmakers' agenda. The legislation will be up for debate and possibly a vote as soon as the next legislative session. With Governor Lulian Guerrero signaling in her monthly address Monday that she would sign a minimum wage bill if it reached her desk, there's a good chance that Democrats will be able to pull off the minimum wage increase legislation soon. The proposed wage increase isn't much for the minimum wage earners who are mostly in the private sector. A 50-cent hourly increase or $40 each payday by March next year will hardly make up for the higher cost of housing, gasoline, power, and water costs. But it is better than no mandated increase at all. The bill proposes to raise Guam's minimum wage in two phases, from $8.25 to $8.75 effective March 2020 and from $8.75 to $9.25 effective March 2021. As in past public discussions on the issue, the minimum wage increase will be opposed by certain employers and businesses. The business organizations have argued that the job market, the island's economic conditions, and individual workers' job performance should be among the main determining factors in deciding whether a worker should get a pay raise. While this is the case, it also has been the function of GovGuam to not leave the private sector workers behind in the struggle to cope with Guam's undeniably high cost of living. We think it's time to revisit the minimum wage, but the discussion should also be paired with a reduction of the gross receipts tax, which has increased 25% in the past year, to prop up GovGuam's projected cash flow shortage at the expenses of taxpayers. In proposing the minimum wage increase, senators must keep in mind that the business community, particularly retail stores, hotels, and restaurants, are already struggling in the midst of a changing environment. We're getting low-spending tourists, and our retailers are trying to keep up with online competitors. Our consumer demographic shows many households on Guam have little to no disposable incomes. So when the cost of necessities rises, there's hardly anything left to take the family to a restaurant, buy clothes for the kids, or treat the family to a trip to the mall. Given these factors, we urge the legislature to offer employers some form of tax relief while also helping to raise the wages of the lowest paid of Guam's workforce. That is a reasonable appeal to the question of whether there should be a minimum wage increase. And I want to sort of put this together with a thought. Just think about this for a moment, because this is a big hole missing in the whole discussion. And that is, in my opinion, Guam needs a public employee, staff economist who can objectively describe the impact of money flows through the current structure of our economy and the impact of proposed structural changes on the flows of money through our economy. That is what an economist does. And we don't have any of that. The minimum wage bill will be passed or not based on purely political interests by the senators, because the government frames the economy by writing the rules having to do with licensing and permitting costs and tax levels and minimum wage and standards for building construction and inspections for safety and fire and food safety, things like that. The government frames the economy, and entrepreneurs figure out how they can make a buck, make a living, not working for the government. And that has to be maintained. There has to be a healthy climate for risk-taking by people who have good ideas. I'm going to return to this in a little bit, because a little later in the show I'm going to be talking about an article which is very, very closely related to this. And that is, you wouldn't think it's related, but I'm going to show you how it ties together so closely. And that's the article in the Post on page 5 entitled FSM OK with Guam as Observer in Compact Talks. Because the last two paragraphs are the crux of the issue, and it goes back to how we run our economy. And as a government running the economy or influencing the economy without having that objective viewpoint of an economist, a staff economist, who can describe clearly to everyone how this is calculated and how these concepts that are being bandied about as arguments, how to weigh them in importance and what numbers we may be looking at. Okay, so I'll get back to that in a little bit. I'm not going to read the Speak for Survivors in Mass Shooting, but let's go back to this article so we can finish up the Zami Ikatni portion of the show. Do I think that the editorial board at Guam Daily Post has provided us with a good basis for thinking through the issue? They don't talk about the political incentives. They don't talk enough about the incentive for the government of Guam to keep the 25% increase, from 4 to 5%. That's how much? How many millions? Over $50 million difference. If the government is going to make that cut, then we have to see some real cuts in the cost of the government. And the government doesn't, unless we see this big flood of revenue from some other place. We thought we were going to get it from Section 30 money from the buildup. But everything over a certain level of Section 30 money has been sequestered to pay the war claims. Remember? It's like $18 million just got sequestered in the last go-round. And that's a third of the 60 million that we could have, or 58 million that we could have used to not have that the tax increase that has already caused increased cost of everything across the board. Just bumped up the cost of living. And as the Post editors point out, the legislature has the power to bestow upon the lowest income earners additional money. They have the power to do this. The governor already says she's going to do it if she gets the bill. So our 15 senators down there can walk proud into every wake and birthday party and store and crowd with their heads held high that they have done something for the least among us. You know, it's like of biblical importance. And there's a lot of virtue in that. Does it help the economy? And are they going to reduce the cost of government so they can roll the tax back? And by doing so, gift the business owners and business operators with a windfall because the prices don't have to go down. There isn't enough competition to lower the costs. And for some businesses, they're going to use that lower tax bite and the windfall to help pay the employees that all now have higher wages. I went through this as a close observer, not directly impacted, but as a very close observer and a person who was kind of briefed on the whole process as it was going on. When my father-in-law, who was running a food, a food outlet, right, over at GPO, when the last minimum wage increase was being considered and then went into effect. And then he sat me down and said, this is what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to raise my prices by 50 cents or $1 on everything. What's going to happen to my business? How am I going to survive? Will people go to someone else because the food is too much? I said, well, just maintain your quality. And it's not in your hands whether the minimum wage is increased or not. It's in the hands of those jokers downtown. So he just went ahead with it. But it affected, the employees were very happy. And at the same time, the Department of Public Health and Social Services really tightened down on the quality of the certifications of the workers in the restaurant. They had to go through training for food handling safety. And the place was getting inspected more often by fire inspectors and, rodent control and stuff like that. And that was a good thing. So the cost of doing business went up, but the overall quality also increased. And there was no impact on the revenues of the business. They survived, even with the increase in the minimum wage. But it was a very there was a lot of concern whether he was going to have to simply stop doing business. So we'll come back and we'll talk about this in just and wrap it up after this break. It's 4:31 and time for a break here. We'll be right back with more Tall Tales.
Save big. Save really big when you bundle up your insurance policies with Nanbo Insurance. Insure your home, auto, motorcycle, or business with Nanbo and enjoy great savings, up to 50%. When it comes to insuring your property, no one knows better than the company with over 50 years of service to the community. Don't compromise the things that matter to you most. Call Nanbo today at 477-9754 or visit nanbo.com for more information. Nanbo Insurance, serving you since 1968.
Hey, do you know what time the bank closes? I need to deposit my check.
You know you can do that from your phone.
I can?
With Bank of Guam's mobile app, it's easy. Just endorse the back and snap a pic to deposit it into your account. You can do this from anywhere, anytime, which means no rushing to catch the bank and no lines.
With Bank of Guam's mobile app and online banking, we're always open. Visit bankofguam.com for more information. Bank of Guam, the People's Bank. Member FDIC.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is also brought to you by American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
And now back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, sitting in for the vacationing Bob Klitzkie, here's Daryl Taggarty.
So I'm going to go ahead and put a period on Zami Kotny for this afternoon. I like this editorial, but while it positions, the editorial board positions itself in firmly in support of the people who are earning the least. They don't talk about anything about the wage compression and the ripple effect that for wages just above, and even as little as this 50-cent raise is over a period of 2 years. They don't get into that at all. They also don't. It's sort of Pollyanna-ish. They gloss over the difficulty and the process of the government of Guam making the necessary cuts to do without that tax, to offer any kind of tax relief. And you realize that the legislature is positioning itself to bestow a gift. And that is not that people don't like getting gifts, but the legislature is doing this in our name. They're very concerned about doing something in our name, but they're not actually doing the work that we need done in our name. So we don't know where what cuts will take place. And we should know. They should be making the cuts that are needed in order to afford the cuts to taxes that are advocated in this editorial. And so I'm just going to leave it alone and not award a star. It's a difficult subject, but the editorial writers today don't seem to frame it in a way that helps us understand just how where we're going to see that the difficult work is going to be done. And maybe it doesn't have to be done until the legislature is ready to give back to the business community the money to be able to pay the minimum wages without having an impact on their profitability. It's a difficult problem. I'm not minimizing this at all. But I don't work downtown. There are hundreds of people who do, who are in position to deal with this effectively and in a very smart and sound manner. And I keep waking up in the morning and turning on the radio and hoping I see evidence that this is happening. But this editorial sort of leaves us at that spot where it's just, okay, whatever happens, it's okay, they're taking care of us and they should take care of us and we're good with that. And I'm sorry, it's not good enough. It really isn't good enough to have that attitude. That's how we stay stuck in this situation. And I keep looking for the editors of the newspaper to leverage their position to to help the public form opinions, actionable opinions, so that we can improve our lot. So, so no star today, and we'll just leave it at that. Try again. There's always tomorrow. You got column to fill every day. Let's hope that we have something better tomorrow. Again, 888-8255 is our number. 888-TALK. Certainly welcome to call in and let us know what's on your mind. I see Ken online is saying, the other governor, Leon Guerrero, said 60 million. Well, I was kind of playing with the figure because I think it was something a little less, like 57. And then he says 28 million total, out of reach by politicians to what? That's why I asked him, to what? So, it's we'll see what pops up. But the overall numbers are important because that's what happened when we were not watching. You and I, and the senators of the 34th legislature and Governor Calvo were not, and Governor Calvo's staff and cabinet were not watching while President Trump proposed and then pushed through the Congress the tax relief bill, which would definitely have an impact on the revenues of the government of Guam. So they did not prepare for it. And so when they increased the tax BPT, they said, okay, we'll increase the tax, it'll be temporary, and we also have attached to this bill a means to reduce the cost of the government of Guam. But they didn't do it. And they still haven't done it. And I still expect them to do it. Let's see what's shaking on line one. Line one, welcome to Tall Tales.
So that 28 million refers to how much money has been shifted to the Treasury for disbursement to the survivors.
Oh, okay.
So it's out of touch of politicians.
28 million? I thought it was
10 million last year.
Oh, okay.
18 million this year. So
okay.
the way the law was set up, anything over 60 million on the Section 30 gets put in this fund.
Right. Okay. So that was money that we didn't have available to the government of Guam to an increased, 10 million out of compared to 68 million, right? So it went from 68 to 78 million, right?
Yeah, so
that's a big jump.
What happened is it went from the 60 million, so that's where the 10 came from, and then this time it was 78, and there's been a lot more activity here. We have a lot more military people here, so the jump is consistent with where we are seeing the military activity levels on Guam. But now we have 28 million out of reach of the politicians, and they can't touch it. So that's why they need to, do everything they can to support Mike Nicholas on his efforts to get this done, and why I fear them trying to do it locally and then get reimbursed by the Treasury, because they haven't got any mechanism set up to do that effectively. And look at the people at Teachin who've been paid 2 or 3 times for the same lot. This is what might happen here with this unless they get the administration and the processing and the accounting set up properly. And I don't see any effort to do it on the part of the administration.
Well, I think not until the bill is passed are they going to start to sit down with the federal government to work out the MOU. And then that's a negotiation.
Well, that's the crazy part, because once the bill gets passed, then the payments will be processed by the federal government. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to take credit for doing something like 7 days faster than the federal government.
Well,
Because by the time they get their MOU in place, it'll be, why do it?
well, there is some virtue in having a plan in case Delegate St. Nicholas's bill does not pass, and so because that hasn't passed and there's no guarantee that it will pass.
True.
And so, but we already have the money's already being sequestered, so it's not available to do things that we were going to do before. This is money that the leaders of Guam have been expecting with the military buildup.
Yep.
And now it's not available anymore because of something else we asked for, and it's at cross purposes. So now it's going to come out of the Treasury of the government of Guam. But it'll be handled by the feds, and
they charge an administration fee too.
And there's more claims that have been processed.
Yeah.
So they're ready to spend that money.
Yeah.
And we are good with it because our representatives that we elected say so. Because each of them is doing this in the name of the people of Guam. And
well, I don't know about that.
well, no, they are empowered by us. They were elected by us, empowered by us, and when they act, the enabling clause of every policy that goes out the door says, "Be it enacted by the people of Guam."
I didn't see that on the super secret massive retroactive pay raise, but maybe that was they wrote that part in invisible ink.
It's the first clause of every bill.
Oh, okay.
It is necessary because if you make a motion on the floor during session to strike the enabling clause, and that motion passes, it kills the bill. Because even if it's passed, it has no effect.
Well, see, these are the little details that I've yet to get into because I'm more concerned about the bigger pictures out here. I mean, just recently.
What? You're not concerned about the political future of the incumbents?
Oh,
you don't share their concern with their career longevity and the ability to hire people and be maybe have their name engraved in stone somewhere?
Well, I just went through over 100, almost 150 GG1s for Guam Memorial Hospital. Let's just say that I'm less than thrilled about the actions of our politicians and those that they appoint. Remember, we don't have any say in who gets appointed to these administrative positions. That's purely a political function.
No, because the appointing authority,
politicians we elect.
The appointing authority is responsible politically to us. We decide whether those appointments please us or not at the next election.
Well, that's where we still need some work. And then, it's like the board.
We need a lot of work.
Yeah. I mean, these boards and commissions, they don't run their departments or agencies. They really don't. They just act as an excuse for ad lib. Because I've sat in boards, and the question will be raised, and the chairman of the board will say, "Oh, I better run this by the front office." What do we need a board for? And then look at the utilities and all the other autonomous agencies. They take whoever ADLOOP sends. I don't recall seeing an executive search or an announcement for a new head of Guam International Airport or the Port Authority of Guam or Guam Memorial Hospital.
Or the executive director of the legislature.
Yeah. They're all handpicked by ADLOOP, sent over, and the boards rubber stamp them. So what we need to do is they're either an autonomous board or they're not. If they're not going to be an autonomous board, we just need to do away with them so that we can hold the governor directly responsible.
It is insulation. It is also a way for for people from the community to weigh in on the questions facing the individual agencies. And so to run the library, to run the arts and humanities function of the government of Guam, to run the education system of the government of Guam. If they're expected, and you've seen this in the past, they're expected to say if things are going so badly south that they have to just resign. But usually they don't. They just resign and they just keep their lips zipped, and none of us are any the wiser for the machinations going on behind the scenes that seems so important that it must be done regardless of its relationship to the public good.
Yeah, and this reminds me of the hearings today, the oversight on the new power plant.
Mm-hmm.
Because when CCU holds their hearings, first of all, the public, the agenda that they publish is worthless. You look at the agendas. CCU will have a meeting at 5:30 Friday or 2 o'clock Friday or whatever time they have it. Usually it's like 2, 3, 4, or 5, somewhere around there. And then you look at the agenda. Public comments, old business, new business, report from water, report from power.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't give the public enough information to know that what they're going to be talking about is pay raises for the executives or a $500 million power plant. Oh, that was under new business. Well, it doesn't say so in your published notice. All it says is new business.
Well, I guess
and all the boards do the same thing.
Well, for the CCU, we really should be paying more attention to who we put on it.
Yeah,
because
what we've got on there is 4 or 5 ex-senators. 4 ex-senators.
And they now run the utilities.
Yeah, they run. They just committed the public to $500 million expenditure, and that's why I really enjoyed watching the hearing and hearing some of the questions that were coming from the public once, and that was unusual. This is one of the few times I've seen a oversight hearing where they open it up to the public. I think they should do it as a matter of routine rather than the exception to the rule. But that was the closest thing we've seen to any type of open public debate over this power plant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just...
When you were watching, did you hear anything about the commitment of GPA to guaranteeing the military a certain level of reliability going forward over the next couple of years? Not like 30 years, but just over the next, 5 years in the 5-year period immediately following the projected finish date and online date of the power plant.
No, I didn't hear the entire hearing because I had some errands I had to run in town, and I'll go back and look at it later, obviously. But there's a lot of things around this that still need to be addressed. Because one of the things I've been trying to get a handle on is we floated something like $400, $500, $600 million of bonds to build Cabbers 3 and 4. It blows up. We only get $125 million instead of the $400 or $500 to replace the power plant.
Mm-hmm.
There's something wrong there. And are we still paying the bonds? If we're still paying, let's say I think they were 30-year bonds, so we got 15 years of bonds left to pay. We're paying 15 years of bond. Are we paying 15 years of bonds on a plant that no longer exists?
That's a great question.
And then they want to turn around and spend $200 million putting ground and infrastructure in place so that somebody can come in and build a power plant on top of it and sell it back to us one piece at a time.
Well, when you go back through the public hearing discussion today, the oversight hearing, perhaps you'll see whether that came up or not. I have to take a break here. Do you want to hang on and we'll pick this back
I'll
up?
call back after I get out of the music box here.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for your call, Ken.
Bye.
Okay, bye. Real Joe, let's go to that break right now.
Looking to relocate your business? Prime Space is available at the Camacho Landmark Center at the intersection of Marine Corps Drive and Chalon San Antonio, next to Personal Finance Center. Located in central Tamuning, close to the airport, hotels, major shopping, restaurants, financial institutions, the hospital, clinics, schools, and GovGuam and federal agencies. Your business can experience the benefits of this first-class commercial facility. Join other successful Guam businesses who have moved to this modern multi-purpose commercial center. Call Carlos Camacho, 300-7744 for more information.
Here at APL, our core values give the company its heart and soul. Whether it's connecting your business with our global network through our newly enhanced service or investing our efforts into giving back to the community, APL is committed to serving you. We humbly honor the opportunity to find innovative solutions for you and your business. To learn more about our enhanced service, call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com/Guam for more details.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
And welcome back to Tall Tales. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. We just had the other Governor Leon Guerrero on the air talking about his examination of the issues having to do with the money that's been diverted, the Section 30 monies in excess of 68 million that are being held back for the war reparations payments. And then we got into today's oversight hearing on GPA and the construction of the new power plant held by the chairman of the committee that has oversight on GPA, Senator Rigel. And one of the burning questions of the day is that in Ken's mind is the insurance payment for Cavers 3 and 4. Did that cover the bond that was issued for the construction of Cavers 3 and 4? We had a contractor that was hired to operate and maintain Cavers 3 and 4 after we paid for it to be installed. And that's the contractor that's going to build our next power plant and operate that one. And the insurance company it took years for the insurance company to make the payout, but GPA has always been cagey about whether the monies from the insurance payment were anything more than something of a windfall, treated like a windfall. But in fact, we are still paying on the bond to build those units that don't exist anymore because they're sort of blown up and they're just scrapped now. And so online, there's something of a discussion going on between Jose Martinez and Jesse Limtiaco. Jesse says, what is the deficit? If it's 85 million, then reduce the budget by 85 million, plain and simple. Jose Martinez says, think of it as a pre-decolonization act. Jesse says, if you don't want to reduce the deficit, then raise taxes to eliminate the deficit, then roll it back down. And Jose Martinez says, if they ran on it as an issue, maybe. I do believe they already ran on it as an issue. In the last election, its current crew at the legislature all ran on rolling those taxes back and doing the hard work of reducing the cost of the government of Guam. Now, they're not breaking ranks with the new governor, and the new governor is not directing her directors to find 60 million of fat or unnecessary expense in the government of Guam. so that we can reduce the size of government. And it's not that I'm saying that we need to reduce the size of government. The legislature itself said we need to reduce the size of government in the bill that raised the taxes. And if you remember, it was Senator Frank Ogden who put that procedure into that bill where the taxes were raised. He said, here's the procedure that we'll use to reduce the cost of the government of Guam. But nobody's implementing it. It is law. It became effective same time as those taxes came effective. But it's not being used, not being administered. Before we go to our break in about a minute, 5 o'clock, Fox News and the ever exciting halftime show. I just want to let you know, as a customer I'm a GovGuam retiree. Okay, so I have Calvo Select Care as my health insurance right now, and I got a letter in the email today, a special announcement to GovGuam employees and retirees, and it says, as we go down through, it says, we are disappointed that we may not be your insurance provider for FY 2020, and we hope to be there for you again in the near future. In the meantime, you can help by voicing your opinion and ensure that Calvo Select Care becomes an option for you by signing a petition asking for choice of health plans in GovGuam, which will be shared with our political leaders. May you be healthy ahead, and please feel free to call us with any questions or concerns. Respectfully. Yeah, we would like to remind you to take the important step of making sure that you effectuate the necessary changes to be covered for the FY 2020 health plan year. So they're asking Select Care enrollees to sign a petition to the government to change the way that the health care has been awarded. Well, we'll return to this after in the next hour of Tall Tales. It's 4:59, time for Fox News. And for the halftime show, we'll be back in about 6 minutes with more Tall Tales.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A key congressional election today. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Voters in North Carolina's 9th Congressional District will send either Republican Dan Bishop or Democrat Dan McCready to Congress in a special election today. President Trump last night rallying Republican voters in Fayetteville.
Republican Dan Bishop entered the race after state elections officials refused to certify last year's contest amid allegations of ballot tampering. President Trump hopes to tip the balance of this tight race.
We take the first steps to firing Speaker Pelosi and winning back the House in 2020.
Democrat Dan McCready was also in Fayetteville. The Marine veteran held a Get Out the Vote rally with military families and went door to door campaigning.
Fox's Jonathan Seri reports the special election today was made necessary after last year's midterm results for the seat were invalidated over charges of ballot tampering. The president had planned to tour some of the areas of the Carolina coast hit hard by Hurricane Dorian last week. But that helicopter trip yesterday grounded by severe thunderstorms. He instead met with some state and community leaders.
And I express the unwavering solidarity of the American people. We are behind you 100%.
The White House says it is monitoring the situation in North Korea. They've launched more missiles that splashed into the sea to the east, 2 of them. These launches came shortly after North Korea said it was willing to resume talks about its nuclear program later this month. Great Britain's parliament has been suspended for the next 5 weeks. The Queen approving the prorogation, as it's called, at the request of Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
It represents, not just in the minds of many colleagues, but huge numbers of people outside, an act of executive fiat.
John Berklow, the Speaker of the House of Commons, lawmakers will return just 2 weeks before the Brexit deadline. America is listening to Fox News.
Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with a true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine. A bistro look that feels like home. Their menu features local and traditional flavors with a twist. From their famous Calaguan Hafa to fresh ahi poke salad and their award-winning barbecue ribs. Mescla takes your favorite local dishes and serves them with extra flair that you'll only find at Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Stop by their newest location in the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. For reservations, call 969-2652. Mescla, a true taste of Guam.
Water. It covers nearly 3/4 of our Earth. From vast oceans to millions of rivers and streams, we're all concerned with protecting our world's water. But none is more important than the water you and your family drink and use throughout your home. A Connecticut water treatment system can improve your water so that your family is using the best water in the world. Connecticut, for refreshing ideas on water.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
4 crew members who'd been trapped in a cargo vessel when it overturned off the Georgia coastline early Sunday have been rescued. The Coast Guard cutting holes in the hull of that ship to pull the men to safety. But Captain John Reed of the U.S. Coast Guard says there's still the matter of the ship.
There remains a lot of work to do. Threats to the environment, hazards to people, and to the economy through the Port of Brunswick are continue to be addressed through a unified command.
The cargo carrier was hauling about 4,000 automobiles when it tipped over. An investigation into what caused it to capsize now underway. A criminal investigation has begun into the deadly dive boat fire off the coast of California last Monday morning. Search warrants reportedly served at the offices of the company that operated the boat. Documents and electronics said to be seized. Former customers also to be interviewed about safety briefings they received on board. So far, no charges have been filed for that fire that killed 34 people. For the second time in a week, Texas is preparing to execute a condemned man, Mark Anthony Solis, scheduled to be lethally injected for the murder of a 61-year-old grandmother 19 years ago. Police say he confessed to killing Nancy Weatherly, even bragged about it, for what prosecutors called a pittance of property. Before you reach for that bag of chips, there's a new study about what snacking does to your health.
In the late 1970s, about 40% of American adults said they didn't have any snacks during the day. By 2007, that figure jumped to 10%. Now, U.S. health officials are reviewing scientific research on how eating frequency, including weight gain and obesity. The analysis intended to gauge the broader spectrum of possibilities, which could include fasting, grazing, and mini meals. Findings could also be reflected in the government's updated dietary guidelines next year. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
If you've ever struggled for breath, you know what a scary experience it is. Whether you have asthma, emphysema, COPD, lung cancer, or another respiratory illness, the right medical treatment makes all the difference. GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic has the latest technology and respiratory equipment, staffed by world-class pulmonologists. Make an appointment today with GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic and start breathing easier. GRMC, where patients are partners.
30 years ago, the very first Subway restaurant opened in Guam. Now, 15 restaurants later, Subway Restaurants is celebrating this milestone with a buy one, get one free offer every weekend, starting September 14th through October 12th. Come celebrate 30 years. Enjoy your favorite sandwich, salad, or wrap, all made with freshly sliced veggies and bread baked in every store. Take advantage of this buy one, get one deal. It's Subway Restaurants' way of saying thank you, Guam, for 30 wonderful years. Subway, make it what you want.
Talk Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
welcome back to Tall Tales for a Tuesday afternoon. I'm Darrell Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie. He'll be back in 27 days. 27 days, so do stay tuned. And thank you very much for tuning in this afternoon. We got several more items that I'd like to cover in this hour. Let's get started right off the bat with "The water smells really bad." That's the headline on page 1 of the Guam Daily Post today. And this story it's a follow-up to a story that happened last week, right, about the rains at Rojas Street in Harmon. Now, you can read the article for yourself, and you remember reading the article last week. I just want to give you some thoughts on this and see whether this resonates with you, because this is the way that I see this, and that may as well. If you're not calling, I'm going to tell you what it is I think about it, okay? So we already covered this. And here are the key points. These are the key points you have to remember. The government already knew of this through complaints over the years. Is a GWA facility overflowing? GWA denied it, but it's easy to prove from the physical evidence. Rain from private properties is being discharged across property lines after permitted development, but that's not being enforced. There is a in the way that we have our laws concerning development. If you don't do anything to your property and the water falls on it and it goes to the neighbor's property, there's nothing that can be done. That's just the normal water course. But once you have a permit to build on your property, to put blacktop down, to put a building up, whatnot, you're going to be able to keep the water that falls on your property from percolating down through the ground. Then you're supposed to keep the water on your property and get it down into the ground using part of your property, and not allow it to be routinely sent onto somebody else's property, including government property. But that has to be enforced through the permitting process and through the inspection process. The government used to have purview over the entire area because the lands of Harmon, the old Harmon field, that was a fully developed air base. But when they gave the land back, the government of Guam did not retain, like they did roads, okay, the roadways that are in there. They didn't retain ponding basins, and the water courses that go to the actual Harmon sink that were graded, installed as infrastructure by the military for the airfield. That's the original sin that plagues all property owners and developers and residents and businesses in the now Harmon Industrial Park, the area between the cliff and Marine Drive and Route 16. All of that drains into Harmon Sink. And the government didn't retain the drains or the ponding basins that the military put in. How ridiculous. I just wanted to, I just think of Harmon and original sin, and you've got the picture. Now the government is going to have to do what? Buy the rights of way? We already have laws, we already have inspection procedures, we already know how we're going to deal with this, but I don't see anybody moving. Got a caller on line 1. Welcome to Tall Tales.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. I had an issue a while back, and you were talking about government not enforcing flooding regulations. Everybody should take care of their own water and not let it out. I live on a dead-end road with no storm drain, and it drains down into the road. And every single house built back there drains out onto the road, and the end of the road becomes a lake.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
and the house was being built, another one after all this, and 99% 98% of the land in that piece of property is covered by concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually called up the Public Works and said, hold it, this guy's covering, he doesn't have a percolation pit, he doesn't anything, and he's spilling out on the street. That actually, from what I understand, EPA ended up coming out and signed him off on it. 98% of the land is covered with concrete. He dumps it out all on the road, and it's fine with our government.
Mm-hmm.
I reported it. I turned it in. And they come out and sign it off. So when you have some, and I'm wondering if somebody got paid off. I really am, because it's a clear. I mean, that property is a landing strip.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally understand, and this is but the laws are on the books, and the procedures are in for the building inspectors, and the standards are there. If the government signs off, the government assumes responsibility for the disposal of that water through building storm drains or whatnot.
Well, it sounds good, but the government accepts responsibility for nothing. The water goes into people's yards and floods out their properties, and nobody does anything. And nobody ever goes back after, and nobody's ever held accountable, ever. I mean, there's corruption is rampant. And we say they're not accountable. It's more than that. It's the whole backdoor pare system, and it's corrupt like nobody's business. And then when a guy is trying to do something right and trying to do it, they hit him both ways. I mean, it's a very challenging environment to live in some ways. Beautiful island, the potential's incredible. We have an incredible friendly people, and we just have a government that is not accountable.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for your call. I totally agree with what you're saying. I want to stop short of saying that that it's it's a system, but it goes back to the solution. What is the solution here? And the solution, there are several aspects of the same solution. And it resides in the people that we elect every 2 years for the legislature, because they oversee the policies and how well the executive branch enforces the policies. And they have the power of the purse. And they create this structure that where our economy resides. And so this is the first thing. The first part of the solution is that the responsibility of the agencies to address this is proper subject for oversight hearings by whoever is the chairman of the committee in the legislature that has purview over that. So if there are reasons to amend the laws because they're not enforceable or they're old-fashioned, or there is a need to there are conflicts between passages and they can't be enforced, or as in the case of Guam EPA. Guam EPA is almost 100%, or maybe it is 100% funded by the federal government. But when the responsibility for things that the government of Guam does is passed on to them, it may not be within their power to enforce back against the government of Guam. This has to be looked at carefully by the senators that we elect to become the majority in the legislature, to get down to brass tacks, find out what's going on with the enforcement or lack of enforcement of laws, so that the policies can be made clear, the loopholes or the difficulties. Maybe the government has already committed to something that it can't fulfill, like the building of storm drains. Maybe it's part of the master plan, but of course we're never going to get around to funding something like this, since we didn't get around to funding it at the time when the permits were being approved. You know, if we think it's hard to to find money to run utilities into Chamorro Land Trust lands. Just try to run storm drainage through subdivisions that have already been approved and people have already built their houses, and then they rezoned from half acre to quarter acre. And yeah, maybe they ran a sewer through there, but they still didn't provide for drainage. Up in Gigos, 500-foot elevation, and there's ponding in the subdivisions up there because the subdivision was allowed to be constructed without reserving lands that had been natural percolation areas from being developed. And nobody at Public Works required that at the time of the subdivision, or land management required it at the time when the subdivisions were being created. That's why I was saying it's original sin, because the government creates these problems for itself, and they're pricey. The same thing's going to happen up in the area between Marine Drive and Two Lovers Point and Tangeeson. When all that land is developed, the government didn't retain roads or drainage areas, and then when they approve it, they're going to have to go through and say, you need to have percolation basins at private expense. Set aside your percolation basins, which is okay if the lands are kept in large tracts and developed as large areas. But if they're going to subdivide it into family homes, quarter acre or townhouse, that land becomes dear. Even down in Tumon, isn't that why there is a ponding basin that was developed behind the police station? So, caller, thank you so much for bringing your perspective to this. It's an ongoing problem, and until the senator who has risen to the chairmanship of the committee that oversees such things gets busy with all that staff. What's the budget for the senator, a chairman's staff? $860,000, something like that, annually. Are we getting $860,000 worth of work out of that staff? Some of those staffers get paid more than the senator we elected. It's an overall $8 million cost of the legislature every year. Are we getting our money's worth? You've heard me say this before. This is where they earn their money, by going back through and looking at the laws that are on the books and how well the agencies under their purview are performing on issues like this. Let's go to another topic here I wanted to get to. GovGuam selects Aetna as the health insurer. Okay, so GovGuam decided, okay, Aetna is going to be, along with Netcare. So Off-Island Company is partnering with Netcare to enter the local market and offer lower rates. Offering lower rates to the government of Guam. That's how they got the bid. How does this make sense? It must be profitable at a lower overall cost compared to local bidders. I'll leave it to you to read the article. And I just read to you the letter that was put out by Select Care. But consider this. As I mentioned in a Facebook Live comment during Ray Gibson's show this morning, will Aetna/Netcare continue to pay GMH only 70% of billings, leaving even the insured with the 30% balance to pay as self-pay? When you hear about things going on at the hospital and their budget shortfall and their revenue shortfall from self-pay, much of that money is from people who are insured by GovGuam, but the hospital billings to the insurance company are not being honored to more than 70%. I don't know if that's a negotiated rate or it's because GMH continues to fail to properly or timely document its charges when they give it to the insurance companies. And that's the reason that's offered by the insurers not to pay near 100% of the proper charges. It's a chronic problem that has enough profitability to attract an off-island bidder. It's one of the main problems with GMH. Now, did you notice that today in the Guam Daily Post, besides the page 1 article that GovGuam selects Aetna as health insurer, did you see on page 12 that the Guam Memorial Hospital will be having a public hearing on new hospital rates, fees, and charges on Friday, September 20th at 9 a.m.? I worked on these fees as a staffer at the legislature in the committee that had oversight on health back 20-some years ago when the fee schedule was approved back at that time, 89. Is it 20 years? Yeah. 30 years? 30 years. And then it's been updated since. And most recently, they just said, oh, yeah, just go ahead and have your hearings and update what you need. But what I found in my analysis at the time was that the hospital was not properly documenting its charges to the insurance companies. So the insurance companies didn't have to pay out what was calculated at the beginning of the contract year because GMH simply wasn't providing them with billings that were properly documented. And at the hospital, they weren't putting the documentation that would satisfy the insurance companies into the file for utilization review and approval of the payout. And for lack of clerks to file the slips on time, this went on for years and years and years. And even now, you know that one of the things that the hospital is supposed to be getting is a current generation tracking system for expenses. And one of the ways to simplify, they want to go out and get a system that will keep track of every charge for every piece of gauze, instead of having general categories of cost for care of a certain level of a certain diagnosis. That would bundle everything in together. And this is done in other places, it just simplifies the billing. But no. GMH has to hang on to a formulary and a fee schedule that has thousands and thousands of minutia. No way they can keep track of it. It's a huge administrative burden that they simply don't have enough people, competent people, to keep track of, and it's not worth keeping track of. But it sure does work, doesn't it? To make sure that they get, there's millions of dollars flushing through that hospital. And the way it's set up, it's worth it to someone to maintain this. So I wanted to get through that. Let's get started on another topic. Well, let's see what's shaken online. Besides Jose Martinez and Jesse Lim Tiaco going back and forth, Jose Martinez says, I was speaking of maintaining the taxes. How does Bob say it? As you were. As you were. Well, you know, we already had a tax level, but then it was cut nationwide by the tax relief bill that Congress passed a couple years ago. But we should have seen it coming because that was the stated objective, one of the stated objectives of the newly elected president. And a sympathetic Republican House and Senate. So we should have known that was coming. But did we here on Guam adjust to raise, taxes where it might do some good and to cut cost? No. And then when the impact was felt, did we adjust again? No. And now that it's been a year, what's the plan? Oh, forever taxes and no cuts. And if you think productivity in the private sector is a problem, for minimum wage people, just take a look at the government of Guam and find out what kind of productivity we're getting, increased productivity, for every time that they get pay raises. Are we getting increased productivity? In some cases, yes. Absolutely. More highly qualified people being recruited. Or we're losing qualified people because we don't pay them. But in other areas, the expense bears no relationship to the product. And that's the kind of digging that the legislature needs to do in order to pull us out of the 1980s and get us into the 2020s. And it won't happen. No matter what the technology, it won't happen unless you change the cost structure of the government of Guam. It's 5:29. Before I start a new topic, Real Joe, let's go ahead with our seventh inning stretch, and we'll be back after this.
Live the balanced lifestyle. Take Care Insurance offers proven wellness and fitness programs to encourage individuals and families to live a healthy, balanced lifestyle through preventative care, being active, eating right, relaxing and unwinding, and being socially connected. They have the island's largest offering of free fitness classes and health education programs for all ages. Join the movement. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram or visit takecareasia.com to learn more. The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
The serious side of what millennials care about and how they're bringing some valuable changes to the workplace. I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll talk about this sometimes misunderstood generation and what they want.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
You should try Mezcla's featured special for September. Shrimp hash crusted parrotfish. Succulent parrotfish fillets crusted with a shrimp farce. Twice cooked, served over basil-laced sweet potato croquet and a crab and corn bisque sauce. Visit Mezcla in Agana and now in Tumon at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For reservations, please call 969-2652.
Welcome back to Tall Tales. Got about a half hour to go here, and I don't see the phones ringing. I don't see a lot of comments. So you all must be just enjoying what you're hearing, and maybe the next topic is going to get somebody riled up enough to call. But that's okay. I mean, if you're enjoying listening and we're doing all right here, then by all means, just relax and enjoy the ride. I wanted to bring this up. We touched on it a little earlier in today's show concerning the minimum wage editorial in the Guam Daily Post today, and it's an article on page 5 of today's Guam Daily Post. FSM okay with Guam as observer in compact talks. Now, you can go and take a look at the article. It's a pretty good article. It's kind of interesting. You know, part of my college studies had to do with sort of the language of and practice of diplomacy, international relations. And so we've got the president of the FSM engaging in in diplomatic speak, not political speak, but diplomatic speak. And he says, okay, I'm good with it. I'm all right with it. Because to inform the governments of the FSM in the United States their views on issues of import. It's a well-written article, although nobody admits to having written it. But the last two paragraphs are what caught my eye. Let me read those to you. And this is the president of David Panuelo. He added, the FSM community on Guam, quote, is both highly visible and highly contributory to the island's development, end quote. Panuelo said the U.S. Government Accountability Office, quote, will provide hard data demonstrating the FSM's positive impacts in places like Guam, the CNMI, and Hawaii. That's the last two paragraphs of the article, and that really caught my eye. I'm glad they included it because these are the most important. The U.S. government considers FSM as important to Guam development, and the U.S. GAO has calculated positive impact of FSM citizens on Guam's economy. How do Guam's leaders reconcile this with its request for impact aid? What about the beneficiaries of the upcoming minimum wage bill? How does it impact the entry-level workers who didn't grow up here in Guam schools, not familiar with the way things are done locally, in this American community, not even familiar with the conventions of basic living. But they're taking the jobs, right? Are there industries that are viable with FSM labor that were uneconomic using non-FSM labor, such as landscaping, construction laborers like flagmen, unskilled construction laborers, and kitchen workers? This is an issue of what's called no willing labor. The people coming out of our high schools, whether they graduate or not, are not looking for these jobs. They're not looking to be flagmen on the road or landscapers or kitchen workers. Immigrants are. Now, I'm not going to touch on the whole issue of immigration in the U.S., but you know that for years and years and years and years, decades, going back to Cesar Chavez in the 1960s organizing the fruit and vegetable pickers in California, migrant workers who would follow the schedule of crop harvesting and work for wages that were not the same as the wages of Americans. What about agriculture? Agriculture right now on Guam is more entrepreneurial than wage-based. If a farmer goes and checks on how much he made in the process of farming, he'll find that he's a gentleman farmer and not making a living, but you can't really say that it's the same as an hourly wage that is successful. But they're making a living because they want to. But how many workers are in the sector as workers, wage workers? What is the impact of increasing the minimum wage on potential industry growth? Industry, the agricultural industry, local industry, apart from the negative impact on marginal businesses. Ray Gibson this morning was using an example of food trucks as a low-cost alternative to renting commercial space to offer adventuresome local culinary creations. Yet we see more niche food franchises opening up in Tumon featuring off-island cuisine, while food trucks are not approaching tourists with local food or promoting Guam cuisine. I mean, not that they aren't approaching it, but where are they parked? They're parked in the Ganya. They're not parked at the places where the tourists are. They approach instead the local market with local food, when actually the tourists that are coming here are looking for the local food. Because back in their own homes, that's what they do. They go out and they explore street food. And we don't have a street food scene here. I think they tried to do that at Ipao Beach as part of an organizing under the mayor and GVB, but that has sort of fizzled out. I think they ran it a couple times on real rainy weekends and didn't get lots of response. And that's too bad, because we need to kind of synthesize all the information we have and put our best foot forward and encourage industries, encourage entrepreneurs. Those people in the food trucks, if they take their daily effort and try to attach a dollar figure to it, it's not going to be comparable to a GovGuam job. But there are tax advantages and incentives, and so they get to keep more of it. And there's return to capital investment and this sort of thing. These are government policies, not so much programs, but government policies that encourage investment, capitalism. And we should be more mindful of the benefits of that and fold that into our tourism industry and encourage it. But instead, we get articles such as in today's PDN, the director of GVB seeks to provide incentives for airlines. I know that's one way to, skin the cat, but it's not developing the local market. It's just getting more seats and spending money on seats. More seats. When you take a look at the numbers, you get, 45,250 air seats per week. And times 52 weeks, it's 2.35 million seats per year, which is about half of our tourism count. And considering that the average stay is like 3 days, 3 to 5 days, right? So these planes are running at, and there's also peak season, right? So most of the time these planes are running at 25 or 30% occupancy on some routes. It's amazing. It's just amazing. GVB is supporting the Micronesia-wide cleanup scheduled for 1 to 5 p.m. September 13th. That's Friday the 13th, folks. Friday afternoon. This initiative was created during the Micronesia Island Forum, where Governor Lou Leon Guerrero and regional leaders committed to an annual cleanup to be done on Friday afternoon. Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio invites residents, not visitors, not military personnel assigned to Guam against their will, to participate at designated sites around the island: Tagachang Beach, Pagat Cave, Marble Cave, and Tangisan Beach. You can search at ibtf.guam for more details. Who's coming out? Who's coming out? Who's coming out? On Friday the 13th in the afternoon from 1 to 5. GovGuam workers? Are we going to see a liberal leave policy for GovGuam workers to dress down and report to these beach areas and go for a walk in the jungle and pick up trash? I guess if they're not needed at their office, it could be done. Who's manning this? on Friday afternoon from 1 till 5. It's just so interesting sometimes to read the paper. And I wanted to bring this out to you because it's right there in plain sight. You'll hear this every now and then, that the best place to hide things is right in plain sight. So what jobs are now available today, according to the ads in the newspaper? Last week I was talking about 5 camp cooks. Remember, I was reading one article was 1 camp cook, and then about a week later it was like 5 camp cooks. Well, in today's paper, it's 12 camp cooks with a year of experience for $11.20 an hour. And if there's no, people are not going to work as camp cooks for 8 hours a day coming out of our local community. That's why the ad's in the paper. Because they have to. Apparently, you see, plan menus, mainly Filipino cuisine, taking advantage of foods in season and local availability. Monitor menus and spending to ensure that meals are prepared economically. Prepare and cook foodstuffs according to menus or numbers of portions to be served. Apportion and serve food to construction employees. Cook. 12 camp cooks, $11.20 an hour. 12 of them. How about Orion Construction's looking for a project manager, also an office engineer, and an HR/admin assistant, college-level graduate. Ability to interact with people and experience with a construction company, a plus factor. Excellent computer skills. At least 1 year experience in HR and admin matters. Black Construction is looking for electrical and mechanical engineers and supervisors, and a welder. A welder. Pepsi Bottling Company is looking for an executive assistant and a marketing supervisor. Now, if they could recruit within their company, these are private companies, if they could recruit from within, they would. They wouldn't put an ad in the paper. G4S is accepting applicants for the following: security and safety manager, operations accountant, accounting assistant, purchasing and inventory assistant, security officers, National Control Center operators. Apprentice positions must enroll in required course, must be high school graduate, and have 3 years continuous residency on Guam for that position. Information technology technician / service delivery. ESS technicians, closed circuit TVs, intrusion systems, access systems, intercom and fire alarm folks. Electronics technician apprentice and electronic/IT technician. And it's place 2. But all those positions are available now, today, and so they're being advertised. Big ad in today's paper. Who's going to fill those positions? All these positions I read out, except the camp cooks, are primarily people who have college degrees in science, engineering, or a journeyman welder, marketing experience, managers, accountants. Okay, but there's security officers, and you've seen the G4S security officers. And so there needs to be people who have more ability to produce at a higher level, more responsible level than the ones that we've seen over the past couple of years. Otherwise, they would just be promoting from within. And there's the productivity rub. What are they offering as a wage? None of my business, it's their business. I'm only asking the question rhetorically, because it is, as I've said before, it is where we intersect, our interests intersect is in the public sphere. I'm not calling any of these companies to task over anything. But if they're not paying competitive wages for people who have the skills to do the jobs at the productivity level that they're expecting, because they can take their skills and go to the States. You think people here on Guam don't have money? There's enough money here to bring people from the furthest outer islands of Chuuk and come here and live and thrive and not get washed away in typhoons and starve or be reliant on food aid. Oh, there's somebody here on the phone. Line 1, thank you for calling Tall Tales. You're on the air.
You're welcome.
Hey.
Anyway, on the point you were talking about, one of the things that I'm observing is that we have a very weak middle class here on Guam. I met a person who came out here from California, returning college grad, spent 20 years in Silicon Valley, and thought he could come out here, bring his skills to Guam, and return home and have a good life here on Guam. But after about a year and a half, he went back to Silicon Valley because there was nobody here on Guam that wanted to hire him at what he felt he was worth, number one. And number two, a lot of the companies here that had the level of work that he did were subcontracted out to India, the Philippines, and other areas. So, they were using off-island companies for their high-level computer skills. And so after a year and a half of not being able to get anything more than data entry and tech support, he went back to Silicon Valley.
Right.
And, I've seen that also in another person I met who came back after 20 years in Baltimore as a medical administrator, working, for hospitals and clinics, and came out here to take care of her mother. Couldn't get a job here at what she felt her skills were worth, and her company in Maryland hired her. She just worked remotely. So she was getting Maryland wages living here on Guam until her mother passed. Then she liquidated everything and moved back to Maryland. So, we have a very strong service economy, but it creates mostly low-wage jobs. And that's a problem because we don't have a strong middle-class economy. The only middle-class economy we have are upper-level and executives in government of Guam.
You recall the last time, not the last time, but the time when the minimum wage bill was being discussed at the legislature. Economist out at the University of Guam gave a talk, and what she was saying was essentially the same thing. Gov Guam needs to grow the middle class, and there hasn't been since Governor Calvo initiated a push and went around trying to get people to move back to Guam and do their try to do their live a life here instead of living over there, and we don't see a lot of return to that. Not that he didn't make the effort, but the reality is such that the market isn't positioned right. Ken, can you hang on a second? I'm going to go for a break here, and then we'll pick this back up on the other side.
Sure.
Okay, good. Thank you. Real Joe, let's take it away, and we'll come right back after this.
We understand what matters to you because at Docomo Pacific, we're a family too. With the Now Family program, Mom, Dad, and kids stay connected on the latest devices the whole family can enjoy. For just $155 a month, get 3 lines with 30 gigs of 4G LTE data each, and endless use of your favorite apps without affecting your monthly data bucket. Add more, get more, save more. Docomo Pacific, better together. Some conditions apply.
Are you ready for some football? The Ray Gibson Show has got your NFL fix every Friday on Sports with Blake. Get the latest updates as Blake and Mike break down the upcoming action. Get your game on with the boys on the hotline, 888-TALK, or sound off on Facebook Live at thepoint.gu. League members get a chance to win some awesome prizes that get you through the NFL season. The NFL Picks on the Ray Gibson Show is brought to you by Current Guam with special thanks to GTA.
Hotels with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
And welcome back to Tall Tales. Before the break, we were talking with Ken Leon Guerrero, the other Governor Leon Guerrero, about the middle class, growing the middle class. Welcome back, Ken.
Glad to be back. I mean, at those hearings on the minimum wage bill, we heard the head of labor testify that there were only 3,000 people making minimum wage, or 6,000. I think it was 3 or 6. Well, and then in the governor's address, it's up to 11,000 making the minimum wage. But what I'm concerned about is the compression, because there are a lot of people that make just above minimum wage, and that's the poverty trap right there. Because when they're making $8.50, $8.40, $8.47, $8.65 an hour, technically they're not making minimum wage, but they're not making enough to support living here on Guam. I mean, the federal government over the past 5 years has given double-digit COLA increases to their employees, anywhere from 12 to 15 or 16% increases every year for the past 5 years. And just in June, my favorite fast food meal went up 30%. You know, so this minimum wage that they're pushing through is more political than it is real, because 50 cents next year and then 50 cents 2 years from now, although appreciated, doesn't do much to alleviate the challenge of people trapped in working poverty.
But it will also require that all employers who have employees that are in that range, within $2 above the minimum wage, all of them are going to have to be adjusted as well, in order to keep to distinguish new unskilled entrants from those who have been with the company for a while and have their job skills down pat.
Well, that's where I take issue, because when I talk with people that have been working in the hotel industry for 10, 15, 20 years, and they're still making just above minimum wage, they're not being recognized for their contributions or their skill or their delivery. So I think well, you know, this is badly needed, but it's going to force business owners and managers to think about what is important to them. And the thing that should be important to them is a happy, healthy, and well-qualified workforce. And how can you be happy and healthy when you've got 3 jobs and you're still financially stressed?
Well, you know,
so that
we've had this opportunity in front of us as a community for since tourism started in the 1960s. We've also had pretty much an open immigration policy since 1965 because of the national policy. And so we've had immigration, and we've had civil service work, we've had industrial work for the military, ship repair facility and the like, maintaining power plants and whatnot. And so we've had all these industrial jobs, but even the power plants were outsourced, and the ship repair facility was closed, and the civil service workers, the blue-collar civil service workers, were converted to base operating contract. And as as a development, as an evolution of an economy, there hasn't been any real attempt to sort of raise, to go from, as a matter of development, from a point A to a point B. There's been no real strategy. It's been the same as land planning. So you have a plan, you pay for a plan, and then you empower some board to issue exemptions. And everybody claims, hardship, from hotel investors to golf course investors to hospital investors, and everyone's got a sob story about why they deserve government welfare. And at the same time, the refinement of national welfare for a social safety net has evolved, and it needed to evolve. But on Guam, where we have a situation that's separate from the states, there's no real direction for the community as a whole to take itself from point A to point B. There's no consensus on what the point B is. There's no discussion about who we are and what we're doing. And every 2 years, this comes up in the course of our campaigns. And every day, it comes up in the content of our news media. But the discussion is so elementary. It's not there. There's no synthesis. Even with the University of Guam, we don't have people who are synthesizing the information and getting it out to the people so that we can create a community of our making, of our choosing. Ken, you got me started again. Got to start this earlier in the day.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the call.
Talk to you later.
Okay. It's 5:59 and time to make way for more fine programming on this Fox affiliate station. I'm Darrell Taggarty. I'll be back again tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock for more Tall Tales, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie, who will be back in, how many days? Let me look at this. 27 days. By tomorrow, it'll be 26 days. That's how countdowns are. And Ray Gibson tomorrow morning at 6. Don't forget about him. Certainly set your clock for to listen to him first thing in the morning. Until then, have a very good evening, everyone.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A closely watched special